Hey everyone, this is Phyllis Raleigh, and I'm going to do a new segment I'm calling Ask Phyllis. And part of the role as an oracle is to look at the past to be better predictors of the future. And my life has trained me for this, and I don't want to go into lots of detail about me. My resume is on my website, so you can get my whole CV there on my professional side. But the questions that are asked of me in this week, the one I want to address, is really about sexuality and the Me Too movement. And that is one near and dear to my heart right now because I'm working on a book called Owning Masculinity and addressing that as I see it. But I wanted to first give you a little background of my personal life so you can get my perspective of where I'm coming from when I answer this question. And as you hear the birds in the background, I'm in the country enjoying the beautiful nature of Thailand. So they're chatting, I'll be chatting with you. And it started for me as a little girl at the age of 5 living in Okinawa, and I came across a Japanese bondage room and discovered sexuality and had an awakening, really. It's kind of, I would call it my first kundalini, honestly, because it woke up a part of my body that I didn't know was there. I was lucky because my parents gave me books to read, and you can read that story in my book, All My Heroes Were Hoes, Life Lessons from the Dungeon, where I go in detail about that story. But I wanted to say about the early sexuality was not from abuse, and it came from a very positive place of learning, and this is a good thing. I first had a boy and engaged in sex at the age of 15 and was disappointed because it didn't result in orgasm. And I went, oh, wait a minute. I thought that was how it's supposed to work. Got the perspective of the feminine and what is lacking in our communication and an awareness of sexuality from an early experience perspective, and having the textbook, but the textbook didn't really talk about the female perspectives of sex, but just the mechanical and the process. So I've spent a lot of time and a lot of work on that, and sexual intelligence is the areas I like to work on and study and focus my attention on. But then I had 15 to 20 was a great time. It was into the 70s, and the pill was out, and you could have sex, and there was no AIDS. 1980, I became a born-again missionary, a born-again Christian, 2 years later a missionary, and gave up all sex, masturbation included. And so I spent a lot of time studying the Bible because I didn't do anything else, but it was pulling apart the spiritual that I did not understand. I was raised Catholic, and so I didn't read the Bible, didn't really know anything about it, and so I was quite amused to find all these quotes that I'd heard in the general public but didn't know where they came from. But after 12 years of that, was rather disappointed. It didn't answer a lot of the questions, and it put me disliking myself and feeling bad about myself because I was a sinner and I needed to be saved and reminded of it constantly, because otherwise I would backslide. So I've said this system doesn't work if it doesn't stick, right? So, and I remember a quote from the creator of the Wesleyan religion, if I'm printing his name, Milton, I think, John Milton, said, people come to religious beliefs for 2 reasons, fear or love, but only love keeps them staying. And fear will make us all pay attention, but it's love that makes people stay. And that's why families around it are very supportive that way, or can be. And but the fear of God thing kind of gets old, and we get tired of getting beaten up, and so we quit when we can. But for my experience, after 12 years and finding holes in the story and explanations that just didn't make sense, I decided to retire and go back to what I knew. I hadn't had sex in 12 years, so I thought I owed myself that. But it was the 90s then, and AIDS had been out. People were afraid. People were having sex but not talking about it. And the communication breakdown had been monumental in the 12 years I'd been out of the scene. So that was disappointing, and it made me kind of go, what happened? And so I went back to understanding some things I had earned early on through the BDSM world, the bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, which was there's rules of engagement and there's safety in those rules. And by engaging with people who respect those rules, you can have a good time. So that's what early BDSM was like before, definitely before Shades of Grey or Madonna coming out with her videos and Rihanna doing her stuff. And they understood part of it, but there's a lot of trust and exploration and understanding of self. And what I've learned from that primarily is that when you know someone's sexuality, you know them. You know what drives them, you know what their longings are, you know what their fears are. It's right there. And mainly because the sacral chakra is so close to the root chakra, fear and pleasure are right in the same neighborhood. And they're stimulated together, and we can't tell the difference sometimes. So that's why scary movies are great for dates, because it stimulates fear and sexuality together. So it's an interesting we're an interesting species. What can I say? We're kind of cool that way. However, given when fear is abused and power is abused, we have another issue. And the Me Too movement question is really about that. And so my continued work, from there I went back to what I know, being a dominatrix in this world, a lifestyle, not a professional. But it wasn't until I saw a woman at a pro dom I went to who had a carpal tunnel bracelet on, and I was like, what happened? And she said, oh, from spanking. And I went, oh mama, you're doing it wrong if you're hurting yourself. So I started training women how to spank properly and how to be a dominatrix and own this space of energy, because usually it was the husbands wanting, or partner, the male partners wanting the female to do this job for them so they could take a break and have a relaxed experience of not having to be the director of the sexual and be seduced, as Leon Redbone sings. I want to be seduced. A great song if you haven't heard it. So with that, I've understood the need to put down the sexual armor in relationships. My work in serving on the state licensing board for nursing, registered nurses in the state of Texas for 6 years, gave me the perspective of working with, and unfortunately, the problem of pedophilia in nursing. And the good news is less than 1% of nurses globally are pedophiles. So it's a small number, but it is a significant number that we had to address as a licensing board. And part of that work was doing research and having a forensic psychologist do the research and give us the numbers on what that looked like and the recidivism rate. And from that, sexual abuse is a bigger issue than we have a clue. And where the Me Too movement has addressed it in the feminine, and the He Too movement has begun to address it in the masculine. The numbers I saw based on incarcerated pedophiles in America who anonymously gave their count. And when it was male on female, it was usually 12 perpetrations that were done, or abuses that were done. However, when it was male on male, it was over 200. So sexual abuse happens across the board, much higher to men than it does to women. The problem with the generation stuff, victims become abusers. And the volumes, the numbers are high. And Kinsey talked about that early on in his work, Alfred Kinsey's work in the 60s. So those numbers have just gotten worse. And it's a global issue. It is not just a Christian or it is a circumcision problem, but abuse is a global problem. So we've all had it. So me too, he too, we've all been there. Specifically, the question, though, is how do I engage in the Me Too movement when I feel as though I'm being blamed for the past? And it's really about the second part of the question that we has the issue I'm going to take on next. And it is a blaming that is happening when we use the Me Too banner. And when I first heard the term, I was alarmed. I went, no, don't do that. And it was because of a work I had read from Carolyn Myss in the 80s on the title of the book was Wound Bonding. And using bonding in a pain, as Me Too clearly does, to bring a cause and bring awareness. Now, awareness is important, and I'm not negating the need to speak the truth. But the question is, how do I engage and not be blamed? And so then I wanted to make that earlier statement that we've all been victims. So we can't blame one sex over another. It's not a masculine, feminine thing. It is all of us. And that is the first responsibility, is that we have to realize it is all of us. Secondly, blaming and pointing a finger is always a bad habit. It doesn't work. It shames the other person. It puts them in the defensive, and you're not going to get the results you want. So the first step is ownership. And it is the question we all ask ourselves. Where was my responsibility? Now let me go back to also some work from the guy who wrote The Gift of Fear. I'll put it in the link somewhere. He was another forensic psychologist who studied rape victims. And he said they all had an instinctual awareness, but their mind said cultural programming. So the rape victim who knew this was a bad guy said, ugh, I felt it, but my mind said I should give him a chance, or, I'm not being nice, or I'm being rude, or that programming that has shut us down, and we don't trust our instinct. Women have weaker instinctual minds than men do. But instinct is an important mind that we have not developed, and we have not been taught to develop. And it shows the weakness of our ability to trust ourselves. And that's an important piece. We understand it when we have confidence, but it is the ability to trust ourselves and trust our instinctual mind, which is 5 times bigger than the brain. The neural cells in the gut are stronger and bigger. They have to be. They're there to protect us. So using our instinct is a need. Now, all of us learn differently. Some of us never got raped, never got harassed, called names, shunned or ghosted, and we were the lucky ones, 20% maybe. And others have learned the hard way by, oops, that didn't feel good. We'll do that again. And some of us has taken a while to go, how come I keep attracting these bad relationships? What am I doing? And what am I putting out there that attracts this kind of response? Because they all look different, The guys look different, but they end up doing the same patterns. So what in our own energy is putting that out is the come home to Jesus question we all have to ask ourselves. And in this regard, it's the same thing. It's, well, okay, what do I own? What is my responsibility? Did I over-flirt, ladies? Yes, men as well. Because flirtation happens. It is what we have been told to do, to show off the parts we like about ourselves. That's what our species does. We preen. It's natural. It's not no, your titties are hanging out. Well, they are hanging out because that's what you're trying to attract. You're trying to attract. It is biologically what we do. You work out, you buff up, you get the tight abs, you look good, you show it off. It is mammalian. It is natural. And it gets interpreted by everything it comes across. whether it responds to you or not. It still is, you are demonstrating, because that's what our sex does, especially when you're young. That's what you do. That's what you're supposed to do. You are preening for sexual connections because it's a hormonal thing. That's what we're supposed to do. But sometimes you get the responses you don't like, and that's a bummer. And that's a turnoff. And sometimes there's force or manipulation or rejection that is painful that comes with it. And that's our species. We're mean that way. That's just who we are. So that's part of it. And the first thing is, okay, it's not just you. Please own that. It's all of us. It's our species. So there is a forgiveness that has to happen first. And so I say, Ho'oponopono. Please check out the Magic of Ho'oponopono video on YouTube and do that for yourself. So the first rule is acknowledge it. Forgive yourself. And then third, have a conversation. Now, I can't ignore the question that was in the back of my mind. Are you really asking me, do I have to apologize to every woman I slept with just for the fuck's sake? Maybe. Maybe. You can't find them all, so no. Emotionally, yes, you do. You have to apologize to you. And guess what? If you do it to you and you send out that energy, it will work. It will release. It will cut those etheric ties that you have to people. You know, we've got a lot of story about every time you make a DNA deposit of your sperm into a woman, she collects you, and she's collected a lot. Or maybe just you and one other. Or maybe no others. But you have made an etheric connection. And that you do best if your intentions are loving, period. And loving is letting go and releasing with integrity. It's your personal integrity that's all that matters. So that's the bottom line. What's in it for you? So giving yourself the exhale of I've done the right thing. It's my bottom line. So yes, it may be a conversation with someone else, mainly the person you love, that you love right now. And yes, you do have to be concerned about their response. So I say do Ho'oponopono first for yourself, and then if you can, share it with that person and trust their integrity with them. But you may want to practice with something a little simpler, because it is real work. It is real integrity work. And that's what we're all called to. And that's the bottom line of Me Too. It is to go, oh man, I had it. I got it bad too, and this is what I did. So what do you do next is your hashtag. I Ho'opono. What I do as often as I need to. So I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Follow me on Patreon, YouTube, podcasts, whatever. I'll be doing stuff. Sunday commentary on current news and what's in our world. Tuesday, the creative push, because what I've learned is that it's an 80-20 rule there, and the 20% of us succeed by pursuing our creative. So it is simply me taking on the role of the muse to motivate you in that regard and push you in that direction, so you have something to reach for instead of fight against. Interviews, looking forward to bringing 7 questions, the interview format I'll be doing in the future, and on Thursdays, Ask Phyllis. Thanks for listening.